In today's episode, we're going to talk about sometimes the problem isn't what we think it is. And I thought a recent problem that I experienced in this year was overthinking. But really, when I dug into it, it had nothing to do with the overthinking. So I really want to connect about that and share with you my experience in hopes that it helps you with things that you're facing in your life. Several weeks ago, I found myself with a disturbing repeating pattern of waking up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. And my brain was in like full run mode, full run mode. There was no crisis. Like the house wasn't on fire, the dogs hadn't gotten loose. Like there was nothing at all making me wake up as though something terrible had happened. But I was. And my brain was scanning. It was already connecting dots to conversations. It was drawing conclusions. It was trying to understand and solve things. And it was so exhausting. At first, I thought this is related to stress because there had been, I'm a mom and I have lots of kids, and some of my kids have moved out. And I thought, well, this has to do with this moving out, the changes in life. But, as the days passed and this continued, this pattern of my own exhausting, repetitive, overthinking behavior continued. I realized that something in it felt very familiar. And the best way that I can describe it is that I literally felt like I was living in the past. I felt like I was no longer helping me with tools and skills, but I was way back there when I had no tools and skills, and I was right on the verge of a panic attack every single day. Logically, I knew that I hadn't. My life today is very different from the life I was living 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago. Now I have boundaries. I have self awareness. I have tools and skills, and I have people I trust who anchor me to healthy realities. Yet my nervous system and my brain had gone into cahoots with each other, and it felt like I was responding. It felt like it was going crazy, like just to yank me down crazy train lane. What I realized is what this feeling was is that it was coming from a much deeper place. I actually just kind of forced myself to get quiet with all of it, to sit with it, and to ask myself this very vital question: what the hell is going on? Okay, and this led me to an important question. What if overthinking isn't the problem? What if the overthinking is trying to tell me something? As a trauma survivor, many of us become so good at looking at the thoughts. We don't always do it long enough to ask what is driving those thoughts, but we can get that skill down to observe the thoughts. What I did in this instance is I forced myself to go a bit deeper and go, okay, I've got these thoughts, but where the hell are they coming from? Are they really coming from this change, this natural progression of children moving out on their own? And because that's a big change, right? But when I finally really forced myself to check in on this, I realized that there was a lot of fear underneath all this constant thinking. It was like my brain was on 1,000, what are those exercise bicycles? Going as fast as every single train of thought could go. Just right up to the edge of that like panic button, right? So when I finally made myself check in and I realized there's this fear underneath the thinking, this feeling of fear. It wasn't a powerful, irrational fear. It wasn't fear around the change. It was actually, this is so interesting to me, and this is what made it such an ancient fear. It was fear around the uncertainty. It was fear around stepping into parts of my life that I have never experienced before. There was fear around becoming this independent woman, transitioning from becoming or from being the woman I was, primarily a stay at home mom who volunteered a lot, raising children, and now I'm going into my role as matriarch, watching my adult children build their own lives, and my final child coming into adulthood within the next year. Those are really big transitions, and they don't come at us lightly. As I began to explore this and journal into it and really pull out some of those skills and tools of meditation, mindfulness, I realized, however, that my nervous system was treating this natural transition uncertainty like it was danger, literally, like it was dangerous. And uncertainty is not the same as danger. They're not the same thing. And yet, under that fear, when I broke it down, the uncertainty and danger were equivalent because that's just kind of how my life stacked up. They're the same thing. So if we're uncertain about it, we retract, we retreat. But there's no retreating now. There's just no retreating. The only path forward is to create a path through this. And I allowed myself to do something that is one of the biggest skills that has brought me out of active panic or PTSD attacks, and that is to look for reality evidence. And there was no evidence of danger in what I'm going through right now. So I began looking for evidence what was actually true. And the more that I paid attention, the more I realized that many of the thoughts pulling me into the loop of the past were connected to old experiences rather than my current reality. I reached out to an anchor, a person who I trust deeply, and they reminded me of something very simple but very, very powerful. That just because something is difficult does not mean it's abusive. That is a huge, huge truth. They also reminded me that just because something is uncomfortable doesn't mean the trauma of your past is repeating itself. And just because life is asking and inviting us to grow doesn't mean we are back in the unsafe, dangerous places we worked so hard to leave. I'm going to repeat that last one because I know I stuttered. Just because life is asking us to grow doesn't mean we are back in the unsafe places we worked so hard to leave. This truth perspective from a trusted person, a trusted anchor in my life, gave me room to breathe because those were very true things. Just because something's uncertain and uncomfortable doesn't mean it is our past. But our nervous system, our survival system, isn't necessarily going to be able to know the difference between that. And so it's important for us to be able to distinguish between that. This helped me to remember that I wasn't reliving the past. I was navigating my new present. And from there, I returned to the basics. And what are the basics? I will put these in the description because they are so critical. Sleep. I spent an entire year just learning how to sleep. In the last 4 years, that has been an entire year of my work. In fact, when you see a big gap in my podcasts and my work delivery, it's largely because of these things that I had to focus on. So here are the basics: sleep, hydration, rest, recovery, staying within my limits, grounding, anchors, and trusted people. And these are just some of the basics, right? If you are hungry, if you are cold, if you are too hot, you are not going to be able to move to the next level of work because you're out of balance in your basics. You've got to have the basics taken care of. Maslow's hierarchy, oh, I can't think of the whole thing of it, but go look up Maslow's hierarchy and it'll, Google is amazing. It will give you all of it, but you've got to have the basics taken care of. Okay. This all led to me going back to my journaling. I pulled out my own Alchemy Rising journal that I created, and I focused on the exercises of the future I want to build. Then I spent time evidencing the blessings already present in my life instead of feeling the fear about the future. I flipped the script, I flipped the narrative, I challenged my nervous system's fearful response. And slowly, not slowly like 40 days or something, slowly like hours, I began to calm. I began to recognize that the younger part of me wasn't wrong. She was just scared. When I closed my eyes and I visualized the fear and where it was coming from, I literally saw like 6-year-old me, terrified, standing not in the dark, but alone and scared and like petrified. Because what's a 6-year-old going to do about creating her own life? She had never been where we're going today. And she's right, because neither had I. I hadn't been there either. In that moment, though, I was able to kind of wrap my arms around my inner self, that little child that was so terrified, and I could feel the calming peace just kind of travel throughout my body. And this just witnessing of my own fear allowed me to stop expecting fear and allowing fear to make all the decisions. I could listen to it, I could learn from it, I could witness it, yet I did not have to hand it the steering wheel to life. And out of this, witnessing of the fear that little tiny 6-year-old Nita was feeling, I could begin to feel this like blossom within me of self-trust because I had taken some action. I had allowed myself to look into the deepest, darkest spot of me with people I trust, kind of anchoring me to reality, with my journal reminding me of my powers and my strengths and the things that I bring to my own healing journey. I am not helpless, and neither are you. Self-trust, for me, does not look like the absence of fear or the absence of uncertainty. It looks like the willingness to move forward while remembering that fear gets a voice, but not a vote in every single thing that we're doing. If you find yourself caught in an overthinking loop right now, I want you to just pause. Create a safe place for you to pause and ask yourself this. Is there something underneath the thinking? What are the thoughts saying? What is driving them? Is it grief? Is it fear? Is it uncertainty? Is it a very young part of you asking for reassurance? What I discovered is that sometimes the thoughts are not the destination, but they are the doorway. When we become curious enough to look underneath them, we can discover what actually needs our attention. And once we know what needs our attention, we then have choices. We can ground, we can reach out, we can grieve, we can rest, we can journal, we can return to things that are true. And through all of that, we can give ourselves permission to keep moving forward, even if it is literally like taking a nap. Okay, because that is going to make you a healthier person in the 2 hours from now when you wake up. sometimes what we think is happening is just the top surface level. And it isn't always that's going to allow us to kind of break free of the pattern we're in and move forward. So give yourself permission to ask, why is this happening to me? And if you don't have the answer, then it is okay to pause. Just say to myself, I am going to pause this overthinking process. I'm going to set it on a shelf in my mind, and I'm going to call my therapist. I'm going to park it until I have a therapy day. I am going to park it until after work, and I'm going to get my journal out, or I'm going to listen to that special podcast, or I'm going to pick up that special book that I'm working on, because you deserve to give yourself permission for peace. And that is one of the biggest gifts that we can give ourselves, is just simply the permission to carry on with my day and park this whirlwind over there on the shelf. That is a visualization, and I would call it, even for me personally, it was a safety tool that I learned early on, that not everything has to be dealt with today. So add that to your toolbox. Visualization of the shelf. Put everything in a little box, a little jar, set it over on the shelf. Let it stay there until you have space and capacity to open it back up, and some tools to open it back up with. Another thing that's a really powerful truth is to give ourselves the permission to acknowledge the things we're working towards. It is okay to tell that little girl inside of you, or that little boy inside of you, that it's okay to be scared, that this is new territory, but we don't have to freeze because there's some uncertainty and fear. And the difference is that we can listen to it, we can honor it, we can understand it, but we don't have to give it the steering wheel. And we don't have to have the absence of fear, the absence of uncertainty, or the absence of overthinking in order to move forward. That a huge difference for you now is that the ability to recognize what's happening, to get curious about what's underneath it, and return to what is true and choose the next step from there. That is our power button. Just recognizing and creating a safe place to have the choice to choose the next step. So as we close out our episode, I just want to remind you that if you're caught in an overthinking loop right now, I would invite you to ask a different question. Instead of just saying, oh my gosh, how do I make this stop? And burying our head while the thoughts go crazy, and kind of stack on us and feel like they're pounding into us. Ask yourself this: what is my thinking trying to protect me from? Get curious. Look for evidence. Talk to your trusted people and listen to your trusted people. Return to your anchors, your grounding, your rituals. Return to list and journal and write out, say out loud what is true. Because sometimes the thoughts aren't the actual issue. Sometimes they're simply pointing towards something deeper that is asking for your attention. If this episode resonated with you, save it for the next time you find yourself caught in a loop. Share it with someone who may need the reminder that uncertainty is not always danger. And be sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss future conversations about trauma recovery, building self-trust, boundaries, and moving out of survival mode. Until next time, my friend, take care of yourself. You don't have to think your way into safety. Let's build the skills together so you can trust your way into safety.